Welcome to the Lit Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Fee. What an amazing month September has been. I've reached the point, thanks to BookTube, thanks to interacting with people online, talking about books, I've reached the point where I keep picking amazing books by authors that I love, books that I know are recommended by people and that I know I'll like, which means I've got tough decisions to make. It's time for my reading wrap-up, September 2023, book battle style, genre wars included. At this point, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to figure out my favorite genre. It's just going to remain that I'm eclectic. You can see up on the screen what I read for the month. First up in general fiction, I was really happy when I got my NetGalley approval. I requested to read America Fantastica by Tim O'Brien. It's coming out October. I'm so excited I got to read it before the general public. Tim O'Brien, you may know, is the author who wrote The Things They Carry. I read that back in high school, and I've just been really impressed by Tim O'Brien. This book was amazing. It read like an Elmore Leonard novel or a Quentin Tarantino movie, but with a poetic soul to it, to where the writing just hit me with a lot of meaning. I've been concerned that books that dealt with issues involving the pandemic would be somewhat traumatizing, triggering to read, but I felt like this book did a nice job of having a sort of poetic dance with that as just part of the environment associated with the story. The characters were fascinating too. They were very much like Elmore Leonard characters or Quentin Tarantino film characters, and that was a lot of fun. It is up against A Man Called Otto, which is the film conversion of A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. In this situation, I watched the film before reading the book. Even though this book was very much a BookTube darling back a couple of years ago, and people on BookTube praised it and told me that I would love it and that I should read it, I waited too long. I had a chance this summer when I traveled to Arizona and back to pick movies on the plane to watch, and so I watched the film version where they changed the name to Otto, and then managed to get a copy of the book where they actually changed it on the books after the movie. You know how they put the picture from the movie on the book cover? I'm still intrigued by them changing the name. To me, Otto is in the same territory as Ove. Maybe they were just afraid people would mispronounce Ove more than Otto, I don't know. But it was a spectacular read. Such a deep, emotional story. Already, with the first pairing in prelims this month, I have to say, very difficult decision. Either of these books could be in finals. I could see either of these books ending up in my end of the year book battle, but I'm out of wildcard spots. There will be no ties this month. There will be no wildcard additions thrown in for the rest of the year. I have to pick between them, and in doing so, I'm gonna pick Frederick Bachman's book because it has more emotional weight. I highly recommend both of these stories. Up next, we've got fantasy. And for this one, we're gonna start out with book 3 of the Edan trilogy. It is The Return to Edan by Philip Chase. Philip Chase is an author that I've been interacting with online, with BookTube, with my writing projects. He wrote the foreword to Half Human Heroes. I'm willing to admit there may be some personal bias here because I think he's a very professional, talented writer, a brilliant person. It is up against Conan the Destroyer by Robert Jordan. Now, you might say that Robert Jordan is the best in fantasy, but I don't think so. As much as I know a lot of people love The Wheel of Time, The Wheel of Time did not impress me the way that it does a lot of other people. And here, he had been hired to continue the Conan series, and he's a good writer, and I love the barbarian stories by Conan, but Philip Chase is gonna get the win on this one. Moving to mystery, thriller, and crime, because it's Sumerian September, which I should have mentioned with the last Conan book there, these are both going to be Conan books, and you might think, what are you doing, Jeremy Fee? This is supposed to be mystery, thriller, crime. Those are fantasy books. Yes, they are. But give me a little bit of leeway here, because it's Sumerian September. Michael K. Vaughan created this readathon so that more people would engage in the Conan stories. And I know the spirit of it was to respect and appreciate Robert E. Howard and what he's written, but they have allowed other authors to continue. So these two books are by Andrew J. Offutt, really, continuing the Conan legacy. It is Conan the Sorcerer up against Conan the Mercenary. I'm going to give the win to Conan the Mercenary, even though I previously read works by Gardner F. Fox with Kyric the Barbarian and Kothar the Barbarian, where I feel like some of this had been done before. It's still enjoyable. So Conan and the Sorcerer gets the win. Then in the horror category, we've got a NetGalley book. This NetGalley book is called Generation Annihilation. It is by Tracy Hewitt Meyer. This book is a young adult book, but it's got a messed up premise. And I mean that in a good way, because this is a horror suspense sort of book. And that's what the horror community likes to read, weird, messed up things. But the idea of a teenager justifying to themselves, self-justification for murder. And it's a family member, and it's intense and about being on the run, and Generation Annihilation. The title says a lot without giving specific spoilers. It's a great book if you enjoy young adult mystery, thriller, suspense, horror type of stories. It is up against Cruel Tales, and I will apologize. This is a French book, and I'm going to get the name all mangled, but it's Cruel Tales by Villers or Villiers de l'Isle Adam. Something to that effect. It's old. It's a book that I've never heard other people talk about on BookTube, I don't think. But I found it when I was researching stories maybe about a year ago, and I was really intrigued. I liked it a lot. If you are looking for October reads with short stories that are different from what you've read before, I do highly recommend this one. It's going to get the win over Generation Annihilation. Moving on to science fiction, another short story collection. It is Shorty September, and it is also, I believe, Sci-Fi September. I've got a short story collection called 50 Short Science Fiction Tales. It was edited by Isaac Asimov and Groff Conklin. I've been reading a lot of Isaac Asimov this year. I love the robot stories, the robot detective, and all that good stuff. It's been very inspiring for me. I love the philosophical ideas and the moral quandaries that are put into a lot of science fiction, so I do recommend this book if you're into that. It is up against a meta-fictional memoir. This book is called Look Out for the Little Guy. It is by the character Scott Lang from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Scott Lang is the man who was recruited to become Ant-Man, the second Ant-Man, technically. Really fascinating. I love metafiction. This is right up my alley. I was so intrigued. This book was in the film Quantumania, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. The character Scott Lang in the movie read a selection out of this book, and some creative person who must think oddly like I do about writing ideas said, we should actually publish this to the world. So it took a while. This book did not come out with the movie. This book only recently came out, but it is well worth it. If you are a fan of superheroes, if you are a fan of metafiction, if you like that sort of stuff, then I think you would get a kick out of it like I did. I'm giving Look Out for the Little Guy the win. Moving on to the classics. Last month for August, I did not finish the Faulkner and August read Absalom, which is really unfortunate because they do a whole Voxer group and people chat back and forth while they read the book, and I missed out on that because I pushed it back to the end of the month and I ran out of time. But I was able to finish it up this month. So we've got Absalom by William Faulkner. It is up against The Exploits of Brigadier Gerard. The Exploits of Brigadier Gerard by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This was Roger's Cheapo Book Club pick of the month from Michael K. Vaughn's channel. I am a completionist. Every month I'm trying to read whatever it is that Roger the Mummy recommends that we read. It's one of those classics. I love adventure stories. It's the sort of thing that I enjoy. It's not the same quality literature, in my opinion, as Absalom by William Faulkner. William Faulkner gets the bump up to quarterfinals. Then in nonfiction, there's a short book that I read called The Ant and the Elephant, a Parable by Vince Pocente. This is about leadership. This is about how we communicate with other people. This is about our own internal psychology. trilogy and trying to get things done. So if you are into those kind of books, then I think you would like it. It's also short, so it's an easy read. It's up against a book I've read part of before. I don't think I finished it. About 20 years ago, maybe 19 years ago, I read parts of Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions by Gloria Steinem, but I didn't have it marked as complete in my Goodreads. I went back through. I found there's an updated version. Gloria Steinem has added comments somewhere around 2018, 2019, reflecting on how what she did as an undercover journalist and what she did for the political movements and everything is still very relevant and important today. So it's nice to have the update in the book as well as to actually finish the book. It's going to get the win here. The last category is the wild category. What surprise do I have for you this month in the wild one? It was such a busy month. I decided to just do something relaxing and fun and listen to the audiobooks from, these are both Alan Dean Foster. They are film novelizations for Star Trek's 2009 film and the Star Trek Into Darkness film. Alan Dean Foster is one of my favorite authors. I believe the best at film novelizations. All authors who do film novelizations. And since I'm a big Star Trek fan, and I believe it's Sci-Fi September, some people enjoying Star Trek books as well, I thought this would be the perfect time. I also don't think I could have fit in any more big books this month. I was out of time at the end of the month, basically, but I wanted to get some more books in. Between these two books, I would say just like between these two films, I enjoyed the first one more. So it's advancing to quarterfinals. Back up to the top, we've got A Man Called Otto / Ove by Frederick Bachman up against Philip Chase's book 3 of the Dan trilogy. How do I pick between these two? Both of them are emotionally interesting. A Man Called Ove is really a very sad, depressing book, but it is about a person who is cold and cut off and trying to reconnect with the world. Well, he's not necessarily trying to reconnect the world, but he is. The world is connecting with him. And strangely, if I tried to describe Return to Eden without giving specific spoilers, I might say something similar to what I just said about that. But I'm going to give the win to Return to Eden. I feel like he did something really powerful and different with his fantasy trilogy here, and that deserves recognition. Up next, we've got the Conan book, Conan and the Sorcerer by Andrew J. Offutt. It is up against Cruel Tales by this French author with a really cool name. Wish that I was better able to speak and pronounce French. Between these two books, I'm gonna give the win to Conan and the Sorcerer. I'm a sucker for these barbarian fantasy novels. They're just a lot of fun. The adventure and the intrigue, and Conan is a great character. In honor of Sumerian September, Conan's at least gonna make it up to the next level here for semifinals. Then we've got our science fiction / superhero book, the metafiction Look Out for the Little Guy by Scott Lang. It is up against Absalom by William Faulkner. It would be absurd of me to give the win to the metafiction because William Faulkner clearly has written some of the greatest works in literature and is able to give us such great characterization in his story that it evokes emotion in a way that a comic book superhero sort of silly concept cannot. But what would you know, I'm feeling a little absurd today. So honestly, the book I enjoyed reading more was the metafiction. Look Out for the Little Guy by Scott Lang is advancing, and I dare any book to try to defeat it on its way to my best book of the decade pick. Let's see what happens. The last pairing here in quarterfinals, we've got Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions by Gloria Steinem. And in case I didn't mention it earlier, she is an extremely important person in history. What she did to help America understand sexism and equality and the need for women's rights to be respected more and all of that. It is up against Alan Dean Foster's film novelization for Star Trek 2009. Between the two of these, the gravitas and weight is definitely going to go to Gloria Steinem's book. That means we've now got our final four for the month. Let's take the moment to just respect them. I like to point out each month, I recommend any book that makes it in my final four. I feel like most people would enjoy them. Representing fantasy, Eden Trilogy Book 3, Return to Eden by Philip Chase. Representing fantasy as well as a crime sort of book, because there are adventurous criminals in those Conan stories. We've got Conan and the Sorcerer by Andrew J. Offutt, representing science fiction slash superheroes slash metafiction. We've got Look Out for the Little Guy by Scott Lang, a book that really shouldn't even exist in our reality, in our universe. And then we've got Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions by Gloria Steinem. It is nonfiction. She went undercover as a Playboy bunny in order to expose how women were being treated at the Playboy Mansion. And that's just one chapter out of the book. There's so much more in there from her life and what she's accomplished. Let's find out who's going to win. I am not allowed to have a tie. I'm out of wild cards. It's going to be exciting. Semifinals 1. The Edan Trilogy Book 3, Return to Edan by Philip Chase, up against Conan and the Sorcerer by Andrew J. Offutt. Now, maybe, if Robert E. Howard had actually written this Conan book, this would be a real matchup, but I think hands down, Philip Chase's book is far superior to this barbarian adventure story. Return to Edan is making it to finals. In the other half of semifinals, Section 2, we have got Look Out for the Little Guy by Scott Lang, a fictional character, up against Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions by Gloria Steinem, one of the most important people, perhaps, in American history. I don't want to make this decision because there's the fun, absurd part of me that loves superheroes in the MCU, and there's the serious, more logical part of me that has respect for Gloria Steinem, doesn't want her to lose. I have to pick one, and I'm just going to go with the fun MCU metafiction. And here's perhaps where my bias comes in, because in case you don't know it, I am writing metafiction. I absolutely love metafiction. My book, which I thought I would be done revising by now, Son of a Horror Anthology, is a collection of stories that lead up to metafiction. I have the character P.M. Brown as a part of that story, which I also use as a metafictional alias to write and publish stories under. Surprise! Spoilers if you didn't know, I'm P.M. Brown. Look Out for the Little Guy is advancing to finals. So now the unstoppable metafiction is meeting up against another powerful force of nature. Philip Chase's Return to Edan, the best of fantasy Philip Chase. This is an easy decision. I absolutely loved the Edan Trilogy, Book 3, Return to Edan. Philip Chase hit a home run here. Definitely deserves recognition. I'm not just saying that because he sent me a autographed free copy of the physical book. I bought a digital copy of the book myself. See, doesn't that counteract the bias? I highly recommend, if you like fantasy, read the Edan Trilogy by Philip Chase. Book 3, Return to Edan, is my best read of the month. Let's go ahead and get that plugged in for my end of the year book battle matchup bracket. I don't know how I'm going to make those decisions. I'll figure that out, I guess, at the end of December when I have to record that video. I hope that you have been entertained by my book battle. I hope that this has inspired you to want to read all of these books, or at least some of them. I would appreciate if you've got something to say that you not be shy. Put your comments down below. You can argue with me, debate with me, tell me you had different thoughts than I did, that you would have picked winners in a different way. I'd love to hear about your reading, especially if you don't have your own YouTube channel or whatever. Feel free to post down below what you've been reading. You've got book recommendations, all of that. We've got October reading coming up. It's spooky season. Very exciting. Every day is a good day for a book talk or a book battle. Peace.